Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the field.
Yes,
My name is John and this is
Michelle.
Alright guys, listen, welcome back. This is part 2, super long overdue
Yes.
of it's not a series, but a series of videos
Yeah.
that we had started a while back
Yeah.
in regards to really just the concept around the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry
Yes.
by John Mark Comer. So shout out to John Mark Comer for his book. Amazing book. And we actually wanted to do this video a long time.
Yes.
But the book, it's funny, the book is broken up into 2 parts.
Three parts. Mm-hmm.
The problem, the solution, and then
the practices.
The problem, the solution, and the practices, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the problem, we kind of talked about that and what our hope was in reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
So our hope was to kind of go through.
Yeah, we were gonna go like weekly.
Yeah.
This is what we've experienced. This is how we've been enlightened. We had to have recorded that. I think it was in December because.
Oh, but we were up here though.
We were here.
So we started that. However, if you've been following our story, right? If you've been following this story, it'll make sense. If you're not, and actually, I'll speak to those who have not been following the story. Just to give you a quick recap, if you're catching this video and you have no idea who we are, and definitely watch the other videos. But this channel is based off of really just sharing the word of God and what it looks like to live this out by faith. So a lot of the content you see in this channel is more teaching channel, but we like to get on to this, just really talk about it in real time as to like what it looks like in play.
Yes.
So you'll see that the channel will have more of that, especially in the coming future, like, interviews and more our conversations around what this is like. That's why it's called the field. What does it look like practically in the field, right? Actually living this out.
Yep.
So anyway, we started reading this book, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, a while back because we were transitioning up here to Western New York to Buffalo.
So we've been going through, just to premise something, we've been going through several transitions.
Yes.
And it felt like every step that we were taking, we were recommended this book.
Yes.
So we were in our church and transitioning out of our church because we felt that the Lord called us to Western New York, which is where we live now. And so somebody recommended that book out of nowhere. Then it's like all of a sudden the people that we were that were going to be the transitioning pastors in our church, I'm having a conversation and the pastor's wife recommends the book again to us. And I'm like, okay, this book keeps coming up. So we should really look into it. And I think it was mainly because we are wired to just constantly be on the go. We're doers. So because we're constantly on the go, I don't know if somewhere around the lines have been blurred where we feel like, okay, this is where my purpose is. This is where my significance is. This is where my identity is. Everything has been merged into the constant go mode versus sitting at Jesus' feet and being in his presence. And so one of the things that they told us is that when you transition from one position, from like one place to another, it's very good to be able to know what the Lord is telling you.
And
in order to do that, you gotta sit. You gotta rest. You gotta Sabbath. So we are not proficient in that kind of language. So we had to learn. But what is it? So we checked out the book, and it revealed. We were definitely in part 1 very convicted.
Definitely. And I think so. But when we were in New York City, we were pastoring there. But we really felt like God was calling us out, and we were listening to God's voice for over a year easily, probably closer to 2 years, really knowing that God was going to be shifting us. We just didn't know where. So long story short, you got to watch the other video on that one. But long story short, we end up hearing from God to come. Like, no, you're coming to Western New York. You're going to be moving to Buffalo, New York, and that's what we did. So back in the fall of 2024, So in September, we made the transition up here, back and forth to New York City for a little while. Finally, so imagine just the busyness. So we have 4 older kids, 2 young adults, 2 teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
So transitioning them, transitioning the house, transitioning out of ministry, not knowing where or what. So anyway,
and selling our home,
selling our home,
getting into a rental, purchasing a new home, that was also happening
all at the
behind
same time.
scenes, all at the same time. Yeah.
So all those things are happening.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I know for a while, I personally felt like God was like, you need to shift your perspective on your pace. So I know that I felt that conviction for a long time. So this book comes around and we start reading it, and we did the first video and it was focused on, we really just like, listen, this is what we're hoping to accomplish, right? And really the goal being, let's go to this book, let's do a deep dive and see where it goes, right? And the hope was that we would be able to capture some practices from there that we could apply to our own lives. Now, following the book to its T, I think is a little bit challenging.
It's very challenging. I don't, to be honest with you, I think that this is a book that you read from time to time, whenever you get off course, just as a reminder of like, how do I get back on? And even the practices that he suggests, like some of it is suggestive, some of it is like, you should be doing this. Like the Sabbath is something that we should all be
doing. Yeah.
We should all be implementing. Now, the other practices, it could be like, how do I incrementally do this?
Yeah.
How do I start to implement this? And I think that as you read the book, you'll see where your convictions are. Like, where are you teetering?
And where can you start to make change?
Yeah.
And really, it says, you listen, you can go as far as you want with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for us, anyway, we made this transition up here, and so we made the first video, and it just got busy. It just got busy. So
like busy that we couldn't avoid. So I think
it wasn't like we created the busy.
No,
put it that way.
And I think that that's where we had to kind of really lean into one, the Holy Spirit. Like, okay, Lord, we need your help because we feel very convicted with the book, with what the book highlighted, which was how we were living our life. Like, we're living in a state of constantly serving and doing and being burnt out to the point where we just like, if we weren't careful, we would have just given up altogether, you know? And so I think learning, like, why were we doing those? Why were we serving with such ferocity? Like, why were we doing things?
Because a lot of it is self-serving.
A lot of it is self-serving. Yeah. A lot of it is. And so I think
and even in church.
Yeah. Oh, especially in church, because, you know, one of the gifts of the Spirit is hospitality, or it's to be a helper, or it's to be a giver.
When you do a deep dive, you really, you begin to realize how much of that is for you.
To feed your flesh.
To feed your own flesh.
To glorify yourself. Yeah, like, so
and it ain't for God, put it that way.
Yeah, so it just, I think what it did was that it aligned what we were already feeling, and we didn't know how to communicate, to really saying, okay, we need to slow down. Yeah. And then enters in the season of, okay, wait a second, we end up selling, because the way that we did the transition of our homes was, we sold our home, but we couldn't purchase. We bought our other home with a contingency, so we could not fully close on our new home until we closed on our old home.
Yeah, so we still had the place.
Yeah.
And if you are from New York, first of all, if you're from out of New York, this probably won't make sense to you because you get to close like in a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah.
If you live in New York, you understand the pain. New York,
60 to 90.
Love New York, but everything takes forever.
Yeah.
And the title process takes forever. So you are waiting months.
And there's a cost to everything. Yeah. So like, we were living in a rental, so we had to pay for rent. We were living in our home in Long Island. We were not there. The house was vacant, but we still had to pay a mortgage. And
so if you're looking to sponsor a replenish funds, you can drop a super chat, go right ahead.
Yeah, exactly. But we had to keep the light on. We had to keep the water on. We had to keep the electricity. We couldn't shut any of that off. And we left in the fall, so we had to make sure, like, if the weather plummeted, that the pipes weren't going to freeze. So like, We had our friend Josh. Shout out to Josh if you're watching this. That was like helped us out
was
tremendous.
The real MVP on that one.
You know, because he was able to help us out. You know, and so and then up here we then had the rental that we're paying all of those utilities. And then when the house in Long Island closed right before Thanksgiving, then that's when it started to fast track the house. This house.
Yeah. Because I'm a veteran, so I can't. Well, first of all, multiple reasons. One, I couldn't own the second one, second primary home
with a
VA loan.
Yeah.
But I can't afford 3 houses at the same time.
No.
So because we were,
and even if we could, I wouldn't suggest that to anybody.
No.
Yeah.
So we were able to close the house on Long Island, sell it finally.
Mm-hmm.
Then we got it. We were in the rental already, and because we had to come up here.
Yeah.
And then after the rental, so while we were in the rental, we closed on this house. So we just moved in here 2 weeks ago because we were doing. So what kept us busy was, first of all, we had all those things happening, but the other part that really kept us busy is we were also doing the work on this house. So we didn't do all of the work, but we call it the messy work.
Yeah.
So we were like, because we've lived that before, we didn't want to live that again. So we were like, listen, we got to get rid of the carpet. We got to do the paint. We got to get rid of the popcorn, and any texture walls we got to get rid of. So we knew for sure we wanted to at least get the messy work done.
Yeah.
Because if we could get the messy work done, get a dumpster, and a lot of it was us. I mean, my hand still hurts from the majority of us was still us. So we had some help. Shout out to some friends from Team Challenge who was helping us out up here. So we had help in some areas. We had some local help with the move. So we were able to maneuver it. But all that to say, we were extremely busy.
Yes.
After this book, we were like, oh, we are. But we really had no choice. There was just no way around it.
But I will have to say this. Now, how did the book convict us, and how did we manage to follow the principles? Of the book, where our convictions lie the most, which I think was to Sabbath. You know, quiet time with God and Sabbath. Like, we knew that those were non-negotiables, at least for us, even in the busy season. So,
that was
so what are some of the things that we couldn't do? Some of the things that we couldn't do, unfortunately, was to sit here and make a video about this. You know, we kind of were like living it out, and we couldn't put a whole production to be able to say, I have an hour and a half to be able to dedicate to this. And unfortunately, because of that, we weren't able to do the series kind of like how we wanted it.
It's completely changed.
Yeah. Then other things were, we kept our Sabbath. Like, we kept our Sunday Sabbath.
That was a big one. I think there was probably maybe one Sunday that after church we were like, oh my goodness, we got to get this done. And it was honestly because of just when we were doing the timeline. I mean, listen, if you've ever done any work in your house, once you open it up, you got to finish it.
Yeah.
Ain't no way around it. Like, there's just certain things where, like, once you start, there's certain things where you got to continue. So we had a hard deadline to be out of the other place. So we had already given, back in December, we gave a 2-month notice. So we're like, we've got to be out of here in 2 months. So we had a hard deadline. Projects that we were like, we gotta finish, and we're both still full-time employees, right? We're still working, praying that one day the Lord will allow us the opportunity to, do this full-time and do ministry full-time. That's the prayer. So we have a prayer for us is that, but we're still working, right? So there were certain things that we're
still working, we're still parenting.
Yeah, so our other son had just started school, so we're helping him navigate that. So anyway, with that being said, I want to say there was maybe 1 or 2 Sundays, I think one, where we after church.
It was just one.
Where we were like, we need to finish this, to stay on time.
Yeah, and literally we said we're gonna be here 2 hours, and I kid you not, we stuck to that.
We were like, listen.
So we were working. On Fridays, I don't regularly work. So I don't usually work. It's very rare. And so Fridays were like my painting day. So I would come to the
Saturdays
house.
we were early all
Yeah,
day.
I would come to the house, prep everything, and like paint like my designated room that I was gonna paint. Receiving deliveries. And then we're living in Buffalo, New York. So we're talking about if it snowed,
First
and
of all,
it snowed constantly
every day it
we're
snowed.
shoveling 2 houses, so thankfully our son James loves to shovel the snow as long as you put a price ticket to it. So he has a good nest egg right now, because we were like, okay, James,
We'll pay you.
and he would shovel the other house for us, but then we would come here to shovel this house, the walkway. It has a pretty big like front lawn, so we're like, shoveling and making sure that there's nobody falling on our property, and then coming into the house, letting the electrician in. So it was a very busy season. But I want to say that one of the things that I loved that we did was during the week, we didn't come to the house. Meaning, like, we had a deadline, and we tried to put most of the work.
The last 2 weeks.
The last 2 weeks was different. The last 2 weeks
every night I was here.
Every night we were here. Yeah. But when we first started, because we had the conviction from the book, it was almost like, okay, what can we do? And also, I would say this, that we were trying to hire a lot more of the work out.
Yeah.
And it was either ridiculously expensive, or they were already doing work in another house, and we've gone through that. We've gone through places where we have spoken to someone, and they're like, "Oh, I'll be out of here in 3 days," and I'm like, "No,
and they give me
longer.
Give
me a realistic time frame." And it's because they want to say yes to the job, but they have other jobs lined up. So they come into your house, they drop off the material, they're there for 2 hours, and then you don't see them for another week. And I just can't
timeline didn't work.
Can't do that.
And then also, to be honest with you, it just like from just the cost of it was like ridiculous.
It was very expensive. Yeah.
So we were like, you know what? And it was a lot of it was things that we could do.
Mm-hmm.
So we paid for a couple things, but for the most part, we were like, we're just gonna do it.
Yeah.
But honestly, we were very good about saying we have to keep our Sundays
as clear as possible.
Yeah. So, like, for example, today is specifically a Sunday. We're recording today, but yesterday we didn't do anything.
Yeah.
We went some shopping in the morning, but basically the second half of the day was just we didn't do anything.
To rest. Yeah.
So I think from a practice standpoint, one thing that we've applied so far is sometime in the week, whether that be all day Sunday or that be the Saturday, like some part of the week needs to be clear.
Yeah.
Meaning there is no like no work attached. Like, so for example, on Sundays, usually I'll give myself permission to, like, by 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock, to want on my computer to be, all right, I got to set myself up for the week.
Yeah.
That I'll do, but like yesterday we had the second half of the day was all clear. I mean, I slept on the couch forever. I don't know. I was so tired. But then today it's like, okay, that means that today we have permission to record, do a few things in the house.
Mm-hmm.
But we try to be good about the Sabbath part. The other thing that I do, that I was doing when we were in the rental, that I haven't fully picked back up here yet, but I want to, is, which I still get up early, but I was getting up earlier there, and I was very good about it. So, but I would take, in the morning was my reflection time, to just read and reflect on the word, just talk to God. And so that's something that I want to pick back up again now that we're a little bit more settled and actually working out in the morning. So getting back into that routine
into a groove. Yeah. But I do want to say this. What we're doing is not it's not to feel condemned, like if on Sunday we have to do work. Like,
now, hold on a second, I gotta say this.
Okay.
But also, if you start reading the book, I will caution you.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely feel like, when you first start reading, you feel like, I'm the worst Christian in the world.
Oh no, you feel red. Meaning, like, you feel like somebody just like somebody just saw you naked. That's kind of like what it feels like when you read the first chapter of the book.
Yeah,
like,
because
the book really highlights.
Well, I think it's good for this, especially our era now, where we're so attached to our devices. we're so attached to email, like we're notification, like nightmare. Like it's always a notification. There's always something to check, you know. And I think it's also figuring out like what fills you, what doesn't. You know, so like for some people, listen, actually doing construction or in their house or doing the grass is actually something that fills their cup.
Mhm.
You know,
I mean,
it's
we heard
more
that thing. We heard that if you work with your brain, then you rest with your hands.
Yeah.
Something like that. So it's almost like if you're looking for a hobby, if you're a person that is like, you know,
where was that
strategist.
from? Yeah.
I forgot who told us that, but like if you're a strategist, you're not like, you may like to golf because you're just focused on golfing.
It's more physical.
You know, versus like I'm sitting behind a desk looking at analytics all day or whatever. So I think it depends on, you're right.
You gotta figure it out. Like for some people, like, listen, I know I took up way more reading coming up here. I mean, I've done a lot more reading up here than I've ever done in my entire life. But what's that called? What was I gonna say? I was gonna make a point. But the point being, like, yeah, you got to figure out what fills you, what doesn't, what fills you, what pulls you. So, like, for example, for me, it's like, listen, having a bunch of conversations with people, I'll do it, you know, and
but it drains you.
But it drains me.
Yeah,
you know, it definitely drains me.
Versus for me, it's the total opposite.
Yeah, that fills Michelle.
I'm like, just like energized when I have a great conversation with people. When I have a gathering, it's like, I absolutely love it. I don't always do it, but when I do it, I love it. And so I think that the whole point is I think we were challenged. The minute we read the book, we were challenged with what the season was actually going to look like for us. And I think at first we also were a little bit naive because when we were in our transition, we said, even if we get the house, hopefully we get the house and we close in January. So we weren't rushed to close the house at a certain time. And then we could move out in the spring. Like in Buffalo, spring may start in April and spring may start in May. Like that's just how Buffalo is. But but when we were in the rental, it was freezing in the house. Yeah. And so like our costs were coming really up being there, like paying for, utilities in 2 places and keeping that house warm, and then electricity. And so we were like, you know what, let's just move in February. And the kids happened to have a February break, so we took advantage of that. And that's where things started getting like, okay, now if we're not gonna move in March, we're not gonna move in April, we gotta make this happen. But I want to say that yes, you're right, the last 2 weeks John was like here every single day night. Like every night. And it was really exhausting. But I have to tell you that I feel like God really just blessed us during that time.
Oh my God, big time.
We got a dumpster that I know we were trying to avoid getting a dumpster, but
that dumpster filled fast.
That we filled up that dumpster like nothing. And mind you, there's still a lot of projects that we're still working on that, and actually that we're not even in a rush to do.
Yeah.
We just wanted to be honest with you, we could have moved into the house as is, but there was just certain things that we were like, we want to be able for the kids to come in and feel at home as soon as they walk in.
And also, like I said,
and to prevent a lot of the dirty work.
Yeah, because that's really what it was the dirty work, because like I said, we've lived in pulling up a bunch of pink carpet, painting everywhere. I mean, listen, at some point you're going to paint, but painting a whole house, getting rid of popcorn, we've lived that. It is a disaster when you live in it because it gets everywhere. So we were just like, we got to get the dirty work done.
Yeah.
So, because other stuff you could live and do.
Yeah.
But, it's going to make a mess, but it's not that kind of mess.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we moved in. We got the dumpster. We got these guys that I don't even know how you found.
First of all, shout out to Rich and his guys up here in the Western New York area. I found him on Thumbtack. He's like one of these they'll do anything.
He's one of these I got you guys. Whatever you need, I got you. I got a guy that.
I can do that. I can do that.
Yeah,
we'll do that. But these guys were awesome.
Yeah.
First of all, it was It was dirt cheap, and it was for them, and it was, I mean, ridiculously cheap.
So
But they were good though.
They were great.
hustlers,
So
man.
this is the thing, because we moved and we knew we were going to transition into our home. When we moved into our rental, one of the biggest draws of the rental is that they had a garage. Big garage. So there was a lot of boxes and a lot of our furniture that we weren't going to use in the rental that we just automatically
put it right in the
garage. So they were packed, saran wrap, bubble wrap, all of that stuff. Just the same way that it arrived in our pod in our rental, that's exactly how we put it into the garage, and we didn't touch it. Like, they were not touched. So then all the boxes and everything of what we did unpack was in our basement, and then we were living in the house. But you get real comfortable in a rental, and you start to accumulate a lot of stuff too, even in a rental. So when we were going to move, John was like, I'm going to see if Rich can help me with just the stuff that's in the garage. And he shows up with like this massive moving truck. So I was like, I'm like, well, can he take the couches with him? You know, like trying to see what he could take with him. But actually he was doing like several jobs. He took everything from our garage, and that felt amazing. And so I'm just like, well, what else can he take? First of all,
movers are expensive.
Yes.
This guy charged me $250 for the first hour.
Yeah.
$125 for every half hour. These guys cleared that whole garage
and brought it here to this house.
Brought it here, unloaded it here
in like an
hour and a half,
something like that.
I paid $375.
I mean, it was
that's unheard of.
That was the cheapest thing we had spent. Even the dumpster was more expensive.
And then I asked him. I said, hey, are you available Tuesday by any chance? Because in my mind, I'm like, listen, if he can move the other, basically anything heavy and big, that saves us time. Yes. So sure enough,
he said yes.
He was free that Tuesday.
Yep. So what we ended up doing was we were, every time we had to go to the house, we were just packing all the stuff. So like I work from home, so like my office was one of the things that we came and we packed and we brought over. Or one day in the morning I told James before I took him to school, I'm like, help me out, and I took most of my clothes like boxed up, and we loaded my car, and before I dropped him off at school, we dropped everything off in the house. And so like I said, the blessing behind this house also it's about a 2 to 3 minute drive from the rental. Mm-hmm. So we were able to like drop everything off in the front of the door, inside the house, obviously, lock the door, drop James off at school, and I was able to go back to work without an issue. So so we were able to do the back and forth move. But once we got here, those guys were amazing. Oh, but
that was really godsend, because
they were amazing.
I mean, I had connected with this guy a while back, and then I thought of him. I was like, I wonder what he would charge.
Yep.
So he's on my phone list, man.
Yeah,
like, shout out to Thumbtack. But this guy was
awesome. So I think that in the midst of that, we were able to stop and say, like, what can we do? Because yes, could we have rented a truck?
Yeah.
Yes. Could we have motivated our kids to help us? Yes. But would that have taken us more time, or it would have taken us way too long? We were settled. We were settled day one, meaning like we had unpacked. They put the furniture together. We had unpacked. All the beds were done. Every room is painted. What we didn't have, obviously, is every box unpacked. But we were ready for bed with blankets, and everything was clean on the same day. And I think that was the main goal. And a few days before that, before our move, we had come and we had moved over the kitchen. So everything in the kitchen was ready, like all appliances, food, and that was a great help too. So like in the midst of like trying to navigate, okay, when we're resting, the fact that we have to do this, the fact that we also didn't want to disrupt the kids with school, because obviously they were, so we were able to do it while they were on their break, and that way if they were feeling unsettled or whatever, they had a whole week before they had to go to school to do that.
And I think one of the lessons I feel like I learned in that season is, because, okay, when you start a journey in something, right? Like, for example, let's say you start a fitness journey, And I've had this happen a lot, where I start a fitness journey, I'm doing good, and then I get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm out of commission for weeks. So I'll have a surgery or whatever, like, or I'll catch an injury, and then I'm out for weeks. And then you feel like there's this major setback.
Yeah.
And then you're back to square one again with this, and it's frustrating. And then when busy seasons happen, then we have to eat out all the time, or we're spending money like crazy. And then it's frustrating because then you're like, wow. But I think one of the biggest things that was different this time was, yes, we were able to see it as, okay, for these 2 months, this is how we have to live.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to order more. We'll have to eat out more. We'll have to grab and go. We had a conversation with the kids, like, listen, you have to understand that all these Saturdays, we will not be here. We have to finish this. And this is why. Mm-hmm. So understanding, like, I think just kind of giving yourself grace that there are going to be seasons where they just look different from what you want them to be. So you set it. So, like, for example, you read the book and then you're like, okay, I'm going to set this routine at 4 a.m. I'm going to get up, and then, because once we started this work, I was not getting up at 4 in the morning. It was just like, I was so tired.
It was like, I need my extra 2 hours.
Yeah. So in my mind, I was like, great, the routine was good. I was getting up at 4, I was going to bed on time. I was eating better, like meal prepping, and it was like, oh, this is, so you get into a groove. But then when the work happened, I think the difference this time was like, okay, now we're finished with that season. So it's like, yeah, we still have work to do in the house, but so now it's like, okay, well, how do we adjust now? Okay, so we still got, how do we timeline that? Okay, let's just get back in the routine. So I think having had those months of like, okay, making a commitment to this, I think it gives you, this time around, we didn't allow that busy season to affect us in terms of like, take us, because I think it's easy to then be like doom and gloom and like, oh, forget it, it's never gonna work.
It's either all in or nothing at all. I think it's so interesting today at church, the pastor was speaking about seasons, and he says there are seasons that feel like winter seasons where you're enduring, and then there are times that you're in a summer season where you're just reaping, like the benefits of whatever it is that you had to endure. So I think that for us, our season of transition felt like a lot of enduring. And then when we started doing the work, we wanted to make sure that we could do all the things, but learning that we could kind of like pivot and adjust, and it didn't have to be so concrete that it had to be a 4 a.m. wake up and a 10 p.m. bedtime, but that we were like, okay, yesterday we went to bed really late. Today we should try to get to bed early. It was more of giving ourselves like that grace and being able to receive grace from God too, to be like, well, Lord, I feel like for instance, there were days that we were like, we're gonna, like every Saturday we have breakfast with the kids. And then when we were doing work here in the house, we had 8 p.m. like stop time, like, okay, but then we would come in and we would check in. We would come and check on, our kids are older, but we would come and check on the kids. We'd call them several times a day, making sure that they're good while we were working. Okay, guys, you need anything?
Communicating.
Yeah, sure. Communicating with them and even with each other. And I feel like the book, is the book a be all, end all be all? No, it's not the Bible. What I think that the book gives us is like a practical look into, you can carve out your life to live out the principles found in God's words that will actually benefit you, versus you feeling so confined that if it doesn't look a certain way, you're just convicted and you just feel like it's too hard and not attainable.
And I think that's what Christianity sometimes feels like. It's, oh my goodness, I'm not doing. And that's what he was talking about today. And part of it was like, and when Paul specifically was, talking about the thorn on his side, like, he wasn't perfect, but then he finally realized, like, okay, in Christ, my grace is sufficient, and I can boast in my weakness because it's Him who does it. Like, oh, praise the Lord. So
it's so funny. Paul is almost like Like that I'm gonna boast about my weakness, my troubles, my persecutions. Like
everything.
I'm just gonna give you everything, because if every time I surrender something to you, I feel encouraged, I feel stronger, I feel empowered, then I'm gonna give you all of it. And so I think that that's what we were able to give into the Lord. Like, Lord, my desire is to be able to be in just this utopian feeling of always being in your presence and being able to slow down my day and start my day peacefully, whatever. And sometimes it was like, oh my goodness, it's 6:10, and we're like waking up and, you know, kind of like rushing in the morning, but not every day was like that. So I think that it was learning to navigate through a real season and being able to still apply and say, I couldn't, like, for instance, for me, I didn't know how to put down my work. Because I work from home and my work is very busy, I was always constantly like either checking my phone for my work email, checking all, like I was not logging off. And there was many times I was overwhelmed, and John is like, yeah, your work is busy, but your work is not urgent. Like you're putting a lot of this you're putting a lot of this emphasis on yourself. Like you're putting a lot of this self-imposed hurry. And I remember that I was like, oh, like, why would he say that? You know, but then it's true. I'm like, wait a second, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor, I'm not like an emergency dentist. I was like, my job is fast paced, and it always is. Like, that's always the pace of it. Whether it's 8 o'clock in the morning or 4 p.m., like, it's that same pace. And I'm like, the same work that I will put in for one more hour of work that I won't get paid for because it's past my hour, I was like, it's the same effort that I could put tomorrow morning at 8. It wouldn't make a difference. And so I have been really good about shutting off my work at 4. Actually starting to shut down my work around 3. Not working, but like, okay, what is my to-do for tomorrow? So that I'm writing that down while I'm finishing off my emails, and then saying like, oh, tomorrow when I come in, this is what I'm going to take care of. Like the rest of these emails, and this that is the most, like, prioritizing, and learning that by Fridays when I wasn't working because I was working in the house, it also helped me to establish that boundary. Like, no, Fridays I'm not in, so there's no reason for me to check an email unless like I said, I had left it on Thursday for one email. Like, I'm just checking that one email. Okay, I got my response, great. But it helped me to establish that boundary. It helped me to say, like, okay, my work week is Monday through Thursday, 8 to 4, and that's it. No less, no more. So I'm going to give my 100%, but during these hours. And I honestly couldn't wait until my Sunday Sabbath. I couldn't wait because I'm like, I'm going to give it my all Friday in the house, and Saturday, whatever we need to do. And then I get to Sabbath on a Sunday. I get to just read a book or take a nap, or, you know, we were still making dinner. We were still playing Uno with the kids. We were still whatever, but it helped me to just be like, there's no expectation. I'm not going to bring out my planner. What's my next day going to be like? Because I had already done that on Thursday for Monday. So I think that for me, even in the midst of the busy season that we were in, that transition, it helped me to just be able to say, like, this is when it's time for work. This is when it's time for rest. And then there's times where my focus gets to be in other places. So being able to focus on what our timeline was here in the house, or work on projects with the kids, like, for instance, helping our son navigate through like his first week of college and stuff like that. Like, it was a blessing. So in the midst of the hurry, I think having like that balance of rest and work, and even when the work kind of teetered and the rest kind of like lowered, knowing that wasn't going to be forever.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad we actually read the book before that season, because it helped. That, I think, just having the language around that was helpful. Yeah, to be able to say, like, okay, no, Sabbath is important. This is a thing. You know, reflecting on God and things like so. Just like the verbiage that you find in the book was very helpful during that time, and I'm excited to see what's next with this, and really kind of just identifying, well, okay, what's the next step for us in general? Yeah. But then also how to continue on with this path of saying we want to continue to be intentional about resting, Sabbathing in the Lord, applying those principles. And I'll say this kind of just to like start to land this a little bit is the book talks about establishing a rule of life. Research that, look it up, right? But the concept is basically like, for my life, these are basically some non-negotiables.
Yeah.
Like every year I'm going to go on a retreat. Once a month I'm going to whatever. I'm going to go off and do this, or every week
do a quiet fast.
Yeah, exactly.
For 2 days every other month,
something like that. Like there should establishing your rule of life, and then everything else gets built around that. So not the other way around, where it's like, okay, I'm going to be busy, and then oh yeah, I should definitely do this.
Mm-hmm.
Like no. You establish the rule first. That way, the rest of it needs to fit around it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you pick up the book, that's an important concept in the book. We've started to establish some of that now. And I think really for us is really just like, okay, well, what is the rest of the rule of life for us? And what are some practices that we're like, okay, these are some additional non-negotiables that we want to have in place and be able to do. And that's really my hope, is that we'll be able to grow that, because I think it's easy to get off track, especially when it comes to staying busy. But listen, I'm excited to see what's next. Well, I'm not going to promise when we'll do a part 3 of this. But we're in a better place right now to be able to do a part 3.
Well, I'll tell you just really quickly. So part 3 is like the 4 practices, which is silence and solitude, Sabbath, simplicity, and slowing. So for us was, I think the one that we focused on the most was slowing when we could, and the Sabbath. And I think that a lot of the Sabbath for us was, we could have decided to gut the whole house. And to be honest with you, in other moments where we have like impulsively made decisions, and I think I can kind of like stand behind that and say, like, kind of always like imposed by me, that I'm just like, oh, we should just gut it and start from scratch and whatever. I feel like during this time we were like, what is necessary? What could we hold off on? What doesn't have to be done at all? And I think that even though we were in that I think that having read the book and knowing that we were in such a fast-paced life for so many years, because like I said, is this book the end all be all? You guys may not even be fans of John Mark Comer, and that's totally fine. I think that it was, for me, it's like, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, the
principles were solid. And so if you are a believer, and even if you're not, but you're living in this loop of, I am constantly searching for something, and you feel burnt out. And I really want to say that in our last, like, transitioning out of where we were really just burnt out. And I didn't want to turn bitter, because burnout could make you very bitter, and we didn't want to leave resentful or bitter and feeling like, I'm never going to do that again, because we could do a lot of like self-fulfilled prophecy where we're just like, I'm never going to let people get close to me. We wanted to be able to be in a healthy space. So when that book was recommended to us, because we have a tendency to just be project driven and love all these kind of things, and like I said, it is part of our DNA. We do love to do those things, but we were teetering into like unhealthy ways of what we were doing. And then also, we're parents, so we want to make sure that we're giving our children quality time and attention, and balancing that with being in busy seasons. So the book really helped us to be able to say, like,
it forces you to think.
It forced us to think. It forced us to slow down. It forced us to have more conversations than actions.
Yeah.
And I think that was, I really do think that the book helped us to learn to ask each other a lot of questions. It sparked a lot of great conversations with us, and saying like, wow, what stood out to you during that chapter, and what really spoke to you? Because for me, the first chapters, I just felt like massively convicted. And I just was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I've been doing all these things.
But I know for me, it's funny, I was convicted, but I was like ready to do that whole thing.
Yeah.
I was ready to.
You were ready to do what you regularly do.
I was ready to go into a mountain.
Yeah.
Live in a cabin.
live
Like,
as a minimalist, like
I
have
was-
nothing.
Now,
Yeah.
I will say this though. There are certain things that I do have from the book that I haven't done that I do want to do.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I do want to live more simply.
Yeah.
Meaning, like, I don't want to have to always have to think about what's the next purchase. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. You know,
Mhm.
I don't want to live by. Oh, I see this new thing. Like, oh, I gotta get the upgrade. Like, I don't want to do
Yeah.
that. You know, I don't want to do that anymore. I feel like you become a slave to that all the time. Upgrade society,
Yeah.
and I don't want to do that. And you know, so living simply, I definitely do want to get to a place where I am able to have time, like to moments of solitude, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to commit to every year a 3-day retreat or something like that, on my own with God in some cabin somewhere, just to disconnect. No fancy conference, just me and God. Like, and I want to get to a place where I am way more comfortable with silence.
Yeah.
So like I was practicing a lot of like reading without a music in the background, or because before it would be like, oh, I'm falling asleep, I'm bored, or driving in the car without anything. Like that is extremely boring when you first do it. But then you're like, oh, okay, so being okay with silence, because you the reason people don't like silence because you don't want to hear your own thoughts sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want to get it. So he talked about that in the book.
And that's something we could actually talk about at a different time, almost like what has implementing these 4 principles look like, and what does it feel like to be in silence? Because
it's huge.
That's definitely a thing. Yeah.
So there's definitely things in the book that I still haven't implemented, but I definitely want to implement.
Yeah.
And what I like about it is the way that he frames it. He connects it back to comparing to how Christ lived. Like Christ would separate himself from the people. He would separate himself to pray into the Father, and he would disconnect from his disciples. Like he did these things. We even look at probably one of the best examples, this Mary and Martha example, right? Where he didn't scold her, but he called out the fact that Martha was that busy and she was like doing. So we often do instead of just being with, right?
Yeah.
So
and I'm actually reading that book, having a Mary heart in a Martha world.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is that in that book, the author connects Mary to worship and Martha to work.
Yeah.
And so he's saying you need both, but if work comes before the worship, then we're leading a lot of that. Versus if worship comes before the work, the Lord is sustaining us while we're doing it. So
yeah, for sure.
It for us, it has definitely been, I want to say, like an amazing season where we have leaned so much on the Lord, the Holy Spirit, and also learning to give ourselves grace, which I don't think that we often do. I think that because we're constantly working, we're always achieving this, achieving that, or not achieving it to the level that we want it to be, and so feeling kind of like condemned, and
but I also think surrendering a lot of that.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest lessons this season has been surrendering certain expectations.
Oh yes. Oh, that's a huge
one. Surrendering certain expectations, and also surrendering expectations from ourselves, but also expectations from other people.
Yes.
What people think, like that's huge. You don't realize how much you, even if you don't say it. I think everybody has a degree of they want validation from somebody.
Yeah.
They may not say it, they may not vocalize it, but you do.
You want validation, you want acceptance, you want love.
And finding those things in Christ alone is not as easy as it sounds. What's that called? Mentally, we know that that's the right answer. But I guess the application of that, the reason I say that is because if I were to say, I'll speak for myself, but prior to this journey of like, if you were to tell me, oh yeah, Christ loves you. Yes, I know that, or man, Christ he loves you and whatever. He loves your work. I'm just gonna make as an example. I'm making this whole thing up, but and somebody would just say that, like, oh yeah, he's very proud of you, right? He's very proud of the work you did. Praise the Lord, right? But secretly, you still sit there and you're like, oh, I wonder what so and so thought of it. I wonder what this person thought. I wonder was it any good, you know? And then if you don't hear anything, you're like, I guess it wasn't any good, you know? But yet, you know, you can hear all day long that Christ, because I think we're like, well, I know Christ loves me. I know you know, I know he's with me. Like, I know these things, but I really need it from so and so, you know. So even though you don't say it, you vocalize it. So
you feel it, you internalize
it. So I think this season has also been a lot of breaking down and surrendering of those things. Where like, if I don't have the latest and greatest, I should still be all right.
Yeah.
You know, if I don't have the flashiest whatever, I'll still be all right. You know, if no one says kudos, I'll be all right. You know?
Also, one of the things that I'm not even sure if you've noticed, I'm sure you have, but probably hasn't said it, is we were leading a church. Like, John was a campus pastor, and we were leaders of the church. And so when you're leaders of the church, you have a long itinerary. You have a long itinerary. You have a lot of things to do. You have a lot of people calling you. You have a lot of people that you're calling. And that went silent.
Oh yeah, that went silent.
Yeah. So
so that was a hard one, because when we came up here, I think maybe the first couple weeks we really heard from people.
Yeah, because we were still doing back and forth.
Still in it. But then I want to say maybe after like 2 weeks, it was like radio silence after that.
Yeah.
And it was like the people who used to call you, you don't hear from them anymore. Or the people who you know, at that point, I hate to say it this way, but like you don't, there's not anything you're giving. You know, there's not, what's the right way to say that? There's not anything you're offering. So then I think, then you just, there's some people you just don't hear from.
And I mean,
they went
in anybody's defense, is it's also when there is a transition, it becomes like, weird. Am I crossing the line if I reach out?
Yeah.
Or am I, you know what I mean? Like, so it is like a weird space too.
Yeah.
Like it is just to be really honest, like it is a very weird space. Like, okay, I am no longer your pastor, but if I reach out to you, are you receptive to that? Or if they're reaching out to us and we're not as available as we would regularly be, then it's because they've left, you know? So it could be just like a kind of like weird, a weird feeling, but it was something that we were also experiencing in the midst of reading. We are like, God is sufficient to fill everything, and like His grace is enough for us. Like, His grace is all we need during all of this.
Yeah, and it's like, so you know that intellectually, but actually saying
experiencing that,
it's like, because it's a silent, you know. But honestly though, and I think that's been the journey. That's been the journey.
It still is,
and it still is. So, but I think it makes you stronger for the next part of the story, the next part of the season, because then it's total dependence on Him, and it's also everything is truly unto Him. You know, it's not for people. It's not for validation. It's not for. It's truly just for Him.
It's just for Him. Yeah, I mean, and I think it's so interesting. It's so interesting that we're having this conversation the conversation is leading us here, because Pastor mentioned this morning, and he said, if you're full of it, you cannot be full of God's grace. And it sounds kind of like funny, like you're full of what? You know what I mean? But if we feel that we have it in the bag, then we're not asking God for to bask in His grace. We're not asking the Lord of that. You know, we're not seeking that out. But if I can admit, like, man, I'm struggling through this. I feel overwhelmed. And I think that I want to say I'm so thankful to the Lord, because I feel that in this season where we could have really we could have been at each other's necks with so many things, I feel like we did most of our best communication during this time, where I was able to just be like, I just feel really overwhelmed. Like, it's just a lot going on. And then, or that John would say the same thing, like, I'm just really tired. I just can't do it right now. I just want to go to bed. I want to go to sleep early. And that we gave each other the space to kind of like feel that, experience that, encourage each other, or sometimes not even encourage each other, just listen. I think was great for us. And to be able to know, okay, we know that this is a season. We know that this too shall pass. We know that God is doing a good work. We know that whatever is being sown in this season will reap at some point. Like we knew that the whatever difficulty we were gonna go through, well, we knew that the season was gonna be a challenging one, but I think that we've been going through a challenging season for quite a while now. So we knew that the Lord was brewing new things in us. And so one of the things, again, from today's preaching was like, you escape to grace, which is like you seek out God for His grace. You seek out God to receive. You seek out God to get all these things that you're not going to get on your own. I want to hear a good and encouraging word, but Lord, what I really need is to just know that I'm enough. And being in His presence is what's going to let us know that we are enough. Because if I'm looking for validation, there's no one to give it but Him. You know, and so, and knowing that also when you are not meeting the expectation of certain people, they're not going to validate you. But yet, so we were in a season where we had no real reason to transition, but the fact that God was asking us to. And so I actually had a meeting for my son. I had to drive out to have a meeting, and I was telling John, I was like, the directions that this lady gave me was like, when you get to the front of the door, when you get to the front of the building, come in through the glass doors. And there was like 4 sets of glass doors. And I was like, so not only am I like going into every door, and that doesn't seem to be the place. I go into another place and they're like, oh, go into, and I'm like, why didn't she just tell me it's like the door all the way to the far left? Like, that's where you're going to go in. And so turns out the power was out in the building. And I get into the building. There's some like random guy in the building. And I'm like, I'm like, Lord, help me to safely get to the second floor. I get to the second floor. I'm still lost. I can't see. And I'm like, why am I here? Like, I just was like so frustrated with what was going on. But then when the lady just came around the door, she's like, oh, Miss Frias. And I was like, oh, Michelle, you're here. You know, and she like leads me in, and it's almost like was pure clarity in her office. And so I just feel like there's moments where God is telling us, I need you to go through the glass doors, but we're going in through these areas, and in these areas it's not where we're supposed to be. But then there comes a moment of clarity where the Lord is going to lead you exactly where you need to go. So I feel like for us, we knew that the Lord was calling us out. Like he put us in calling, and then we knew that the calling felt right, but then we knew that the location wasn't permanent. And when the Lord let us out, it still felt like we're going through these glass doors. We're not always getting it right, but still He's guiding us. Like He's leading us to where clarity is. So we are so certain that we're supposed to be where we are. But if we match what we're feeling with what God is saying and what other people are saying, nothing really seems to mesh. Like, people are saying, well, why did you go? Everything was great. You had your house here. You had your job here. Everything. The kids had all their supports. The kids had everything they needed. And then we're seeing here where the Lord's hand is so over everything. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like slow in certain areas and so fast in other areas. And I'm just like, God, only you. Like, only God could lead us here to let everything happen how it did, to use a book that kept coming up just to show us, like, there is grace. You know, like, the book literally showed us, like, this is the problem with how you're living. This is how Jesus did it. This is how you can implement it based on how Jesus did it. But also He prefaces the book by saying, like, don't be convicted if there are seasons where you are navigating, like where you revert back to old ways of thinking. And then just remember, like, your worth is not there. Your worth is found in Him. And so, of course, correct. So yeah, so like actually living that out has been interesting. And so for us, we still encourage that. Like, we encourage you to read the book. If he's not your guy, then don't read the book. If that's gonna stumble you and you're gonna be like, I'm not a follower of Comer. I don't like him. I'm not asking you to be a follower of Comer. I'm just saying the book is a solid book that if you are struggling through life as a believer, feeling like, how do I live this out in a way that is practical, that is biblical, that will actually help me direct my life, the book was great. The book was great.
And it's really centered on just resting in him, just being in him. That's the focus. That's the whole focus.
How do we become actual disciples of God? Like how do we actually, when you are a student, the student doesn't surpass the master, but the student is learning to become like the master, right? If you go to like masters, if you go to get your masters, you're literally becoming proficient in an area to the point that then you carve out which area is that you're gonna be a master in. And so you present this thesis at the end of your studies to be able to say, like, I studied this, this is my research, this is back, this is where it's at, and this is what I can bring to the table. And then you get your master's. Like, okay, you have been successfully able to prove that you are a master in this particular bubble and where you're at. And I think that that's the point. Like, we are following the master of all masters, which is Jesus Christ. We are learning to be like him. We are not trying to surpass him, but we could only do it through his grace. We don't earn it. We don't deserve it, but yet he calls us worthy. He calls us his children. And just like a good father, he leads us and he extends grace to us, not for us to constantly stumble over the same things, but for us to say, like, owie daddy, like I got hurt doing this. What did I do wrong? So like with my son David tripped the other day and I'm like, you're running up the stairs, you gotta be careful. So now every time he looks at his knee, he's like, I had to be careful because my knee still hurts. I think that's the point of, like, in life when we're stumbling, like, I'm moving too fast, I need to slow down. God, give me the direction to do it, right? And so we're in that season now, like, God, I don't want to just keep opening the wrong glass door. Well, I will wait until you give me the clear direction so that I can walk in through the right door and I could be led exactly where you want me to go.
And he knows how to time it. So
he does.
So that's what we're seeing this season. But listen, guys,
this is long-winded one.
This was a long one, but we appreciate.
We owed you a couple videos.
So our video is generally around 20-30 minutes. So this captures a couple sessions you missed. But listen, definitely look out for the next one. We will be updating you as soon as possible. But hopefully, if you haven't seen the first one, definitely go check out the first one. That way, this one makes a little bit more sense. But we appreciate you guys staying the course to the end of this video.
Yes.
Like, share, and subscribe. Get this out so somebody else, and let's continue to grow the channel, grow the community together. And we appreciate you guys staying with us. All right. Have a good one.
Bye.